Silence feels strange when you first step into it. The moment the noise fades, you start noticing things you never paid attention to before: the sound of your own breathing, the weight of your own thoughts, the emotions you've been carrying for years. At first, it feels uncomfortable, almost like something is wrong. But as you sit longer with it, you realize silence is not empty at all. Silence is full. It is full of answers, full of clarity, full of wisdom that the noise of the world never allowed you to hear. And this is the strange truth about why spiritual people isolate themselves. They are not running away from life. They are stepping deeper into it. They are not avoiding people. They are reconnecting with their higher self. They are not weak for withdrawing. They are strong enough to do what most people are too afraid to face: being alone with themselves. A spiritual awakening changes the way you experience everything. What once felt normal suddenly feels hollow. The conversations you used to enjoy now feel repetitive. The places you used to go now feel draining. The relationships you used to cling to now feel like weights holding you back. Nothing out there satisfies the same way it used to, because something inside of you has awakened. That awakening pulls you inward. It pulls you toward silence, toward solitude, toward reflection. This is why chosen ones isolate themselves. They are no longer satisfied with shallow living. They crave depth, truth, and authenticity, and those things are rarely found in crowds. But here's where the strange truth gets even deeper. The moment you begin to withdraw, people start noticing. Friends wonder why you've become distant. Family asks why you're so quiet. Coworkers whisper that you've changed. And they're right, you have changed. But the change is not rejection. It's transformation. The problem is, people who haven't experienced a spiritual awakening can't understand what's happening inside you. To them, your silence looks like coldness. Your solitude looks like loneliness. Your distance looks like arrogance. But you know the truth. You're not cutting people off. You're cutting through illusions. You're not rejecting them. You're reconnecting with yourself. At first, isolation feels like loss. You lose the constant chatter. You lose the busy schedule. You lose the endless cycle of external validation. But slowly, that loss turns into gain. The space you create by stepping back begins to fill with something new: clarity. You start to hear your own voice without interference. You start to recognize what you actually want, not what others told you to want. You start to feel at peace without needing someone else to provide it. This shift is powerful, but it's also uncomfortable. Because when you're finally alone with yourself, all the things you buried under distraction begin to surface. The pain you avoided, the fears you suppressed, the doubts you ignored. In the silence, they all rise to the surface. And this is the real reason most people avoid solitude, because silence tells the truth. Isolation forces you to face what you've been running from. And that's exactly why chosen ones embrace it. They know growth never comes from avoiding pain. It comes from walking through it. They know healing doesn't happen in the middle of constant distraction. It happens when you finally sit still long enough to feel what you've been carrying. This is why isolation is not weakness. It's strength. It takes courage to stop running. It takes courage to sit in the silence. It takes courage to face yourself honestly. And once you do, you become unstoppable. Think about it. Most people fill every moment of their lives with noise. They play music the second they wake up. They scroll through their phones the moment they feel bored. They surround themselves with people, just so they don't have to sit alone with their thoughts. But chosen ones begin to crave the exact opposite. They don't fear silence anymore. They welcome it. They don't need to constantly be around people because they've learned how to be enough for themselves. They don't run from boredom because they've discovered creativity hides inside stillness. This is the strange truth. The more you isolate, the more alive you actually become. And yet, Isolation doesn't just take things away. It gives you back everything that truly matters. It gives you freedom. It gives you clarity. It gives you strength. It gives you creativity. Some of the greatest insights, the most life-changing ideas, and the deepest breakthroughs you will ever experience don't come in the middle of a crowd. They come in the middle of silence. When the noise is gone, the truth finally has space to speak. And that truth changes you forever. But here's the part people rarely talk about. When you go through isolation, you return different. You no longer see people the same way. You notice their energy more. You feel the difference between authenticity and performance. You see how much of daily life is a distraction from real growth. And suddenly, you can't unsee it. You can't laugh at meaningless conversations the way you used to. You can't stay in environments that drain you the way you once did. You can't pretend to be someone you're not just to fit in. That's why isolation often leads to a permanent shift. You simply outgrow what you used to tolerate. The strange truth is that isolation changes your relationship with connection. You stop needing people to feel whole. Instead, you begin choosing people who align with your growth. You stop chasing approval. Instead, you begin walking with authenticity. You stop filling silence with meaningless talk. Instead, you speak only when it carries weight. This is why people who come out of a spiritual awakening feel magnetic. They no longer crave attention, which makes their energy powerful. They no longer chase validation, which makes their presence uncheckable. And they no longer fear being alone, which makes their relationships more genuine. Of course, not everyone understands this. The world is addicted to noise. Most people would rather drown in distraction than face themselves in silence. That's why they look at you and think you're strange. They don't realize that you've simply discovered what they're too afraid to admit, that most of what they cling to is keeping them from ever truly meeting themselves. Your isolation exposes their dependence. Your silence reveals their fear. And that's why some people resist your change, not because you're wrong, but because you remind them of the truth they aren't ready to face. But you can't shrink yourself just to make others comfortable. Once you've tasted the clarity of solitude, the noise of the crowd will never satisfy you again. Once you've felt the strength that comes from silence, you will never go back to weakness disguised as busyness. Once you've met your true self in isolation, you can never again pretend to be the mask the world prefers. This is why chosen ones isolate themselves. They understand that the silence they embrace today will become the power they carry tomorrow. And the beauty of this journey is that isolation doesn't make you cold. It makes you warm in a different way. It doesn't make you reject love. It makes you love more authentically. It doesn't make you antisocial. It makes you intentional about who you give your energy to. Because once you know your own worth, you stop giving it to just anyone. Once you know your own voice, you stop letting others speak over it. Once you know your own strength, you stop letting others define it. Isolation is not an ending. It is a beginning. It is the chapter of your awakening where you disappear, not because you are lost, but because you are being rebuilt. And when you return, you don't return the same. You return lighter, freer, wiser. You return with a presence that doesn't need to be explained. You return with a clarity that can't be shaken. You return as the version of yourself you were always meant to be. So if you find yourself in a season of solitude right now, don't fight it. Don't let the world convince you that being alone is weakness. Don't mistake your silence for failure. This is your transformation. This is the refining fire that will shape you into someone unshakable. This is the strange truth about why spiritual people isolate themselves. They step away from the world not to escape it, but to return stronger, clearer, freer, and more alive than ever before. And when you rise from this silence, the world will notice. They may not understand, but they will feel it. They will feel the weight of your presence. They will feel the clarity in your words. They will feel the strength in your energy. That is the gift of isolation. That is the power of awakening. That is the strange truth. If this message connected with you, thank you for watching until the end. Honor your path. Honor your growth. And if this spoke to your journey, like and subscribe not out of habit, but as a declaration that your awakening matters. Your strength is real, and your voice deserves to be heard.